Chuck Colson with the Christian Prison Fellowship has been working with prisoners. Chuck, what is the biblical answer? What do you do when you go into prison? What do you do to help the people?
Well, our whole job, Pat, is to build Christian fellowships, really to plant a church inside the prison. And we go in and we spend a full week inside. We have 22 instructors now, many minorities, many ex-offenders, but most of them almost all of them with advanced degrees in teaching or counseling. And we'll put on a one-week seminar inside the prison. We did 100 prisons in America last year. We got one going on this week in Australia. We've had them in Canada, England. And we will have inmates come out anywhere from maybe a low number would be 25 or 30 to a high number would be 300, which we had recently in a prison in Waupun, Wisconsin. And these inmates will come out and take part in 32 hours of teaching through that week. Then we leave them materials, Bible materials, and our volunteers continue to go in and conduct weekly follow-ups. And then we have care committees now in about 100 cities in America where people coming out of prison are referred in our directory to Christian volunteer help in those cities. And we get them a job. We do a lot of family counseling now with inmates while they're in prison. In the Southeast, we have a couple of thousand people who have signed up as counselors with the families. So when an inmate goes into prison, we're able to go and be with his family, invite them into a church, see if they need particular help. What we're trying to do, to put it in its simplest terms, we also take people out of prison. And I must tell you, we've had 600. There are 10 gals in Washington, D.C. now out of 4 federal prisons. And we've had 600 that we have taken out of prison to live with us for 2 weeks. And one of the things, I don't go too much for statistics, but one statistic I'm really proud of, Pat, 600 inmates over the last 5 years we've taken out of prison for 2 weeks at a time, convicted of everything from embezzlement to first-degree murder. We haven't had one single disciplinary incident. The place where they stay complains that one group stayed up a little too late at night praying and singing hymns. But they have represented themselves as Christian ambassadors outside of that prison so beautifully.
It's incredible.
And our whole thrust is to develop a fellowship inside the prison and a fellowship outside the prison so that the Christian church is doing what our Lord has commanded us to do, to care for those inmates. And what we see is that where Christ comes into the heart of those people, where they really meet him, where they really then are nurtured and helped by the church, where they study, they don't go back to a life of crime. Those people come out and they find a home in the church and they find a job and help and family support, and they're back on their feet. And that's how you break recidivism in this country. Chief Justice Burger just gave a speech to the American Bar Association, and much was publicized about what he said on education and other things, but buried in the speech, not picked up by any secular news organization, was one of his last recommendations. He said one of the most important things we can do in the prison is institute more religious programming. It's the one hope in the prison, and I think everybody who's been inside believes it and understands it. But I had one of the greatest thrills in my life, Pat, to preach. I preached as you did in the Full Gospel Church in Seoul, and what a joy to see thousands of people and the tremendous growth of that church. That's with Billy Kim standing outside the gates of the Suwon prison before we went in to preach that morning to 500 inmates. I think we'll see that shot in just a second. Yeah, there they are. 500 inmates came out, packed the hall. I didn't think people would know me over there, but it was amazing when they announced I was there. And I began to preach and gave them the gospel in a largely Buddhist culture. And it was extraordinary when I finished, because that's a view of the crowd from where I was preaching. Billy Kim, who was my interpreter, who interpreted for Billy Graham, and I know you met him when you were there, gave an invitation at the end, and I don't count, but you can see men all over that hall were standing receiving Christ, and with a great solemn air that came over that entire prison. It was really one of the most exciting experiences I've had, to see those men stand to make their decisions for Christ in the heart of that prison, which is a hostile culture to the gospel to begin with, and in a Buddhist land, hundreds of men. Every prison I went in Korea. You know, Pat, it's hard for me to believe that just 6 years ago I first came down here to be on this show with you when you had the other studio.
That's right.
And how God has prospered your ministry and blessed you, and how he's blessed us. I think back then I was struggling what I should do with my life. And here it is 6 years after I was first on your show. And now there are 6,800 volunteers across America and 100 on the staff, and thousands of inmates going through our training program. And I guess I have realized one of the great spiritual lessons of my life. God uses our adversity and our defeats and our tragedies sometimes more for his glory than all the good things we think we do in our life.